we sell more than tickets, right? So you can do merch packages, hotels, suites, like virtually anything at this point. You can buy on Tixr. We're actually transcending ticketing and moving into a larger e-commerce kind of a company tied to live entertainment. And again, if you take the fan perspective, well, I get to buy my T-shirt and pick it up, right? I'm traveling in as a visitor of a sports team. I can now have a secure economic hotel option where everything's taken care of for me. So I have optionality that I didn't necessarily have before in a very elegant way. And if you're the team, it's great for you because you're increasing your revenues, right? You're increasing your throughput in terms of what you can sell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of examples of this, but it's always a two-sided equation when we're building products and innovating.
Welcome to the Navigating Sports Business podcast, where we uncover insights from the most prominent leaders in our industry. Today, I am happy to be joined by Robert Davari, the CEO and founder at Tixr. Robert, thank you for joining us today from Santa Monica.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
I want to start kind of at the beginning of Tixr, or even before Tixr, but I think you've mentioned that the idea was sparked at Coachella in 2011. My first question is, do you remember the band that was playing or anything about that moment?
The Coachella story always kind of gets mixed into the Tixr lore, but it was more that my co-founder and I, we'd attend Coachella every year, right? So, he's our CTO now. Went to college together. We had a group of friends that would go every year. But the actual idea for Tixr started a bit before that. It was so my dad he's an optimization scientist effectively. He worked for NASA for years. He was at the end of his career, he was doing building software to optimize nuclear power plants. And I was getting frustrated buying tickets to a variety of events. I'd always have to end up on the secondary market. It just seemed so inefficient. So we started really analyzing the market dynamics of primary, secondary market companies with him. And he's like, look, this is an optimization issue. And we started just for fun working on algorithms to solve that, right? Around dynamic pricing and market fluctuations in a way that would be more cohesive for the fan. The Coachella story is, where that kind of intersected with Patrick, who's my co-founder, I decided at that point to, I had another company, I had a telecommunications company I was running, and I decided to start the Tixr project. What became Tixr was originally called Dynatix. You guys could probably tell why, because of all the dynamic pricing kind of birth of the company. But I was with Patrick, and I believe the system that was doing Coachella went down. Back then, like it failed because there was so much demand. And I was talking to him, I'm like, look, we need to build a system where I want to really build a system that's both efficient but also can scale and is modern and all the good stuff. And he's like, I can do this, right? This is what I do. This is my specialty. And he was at Fox Interactive for years. He built their fantasy sports products. He had a whole team under him. So the real story is what, probably the birth of it in terms of like our team and what ended up creating the product that did happen at that festival. But the project has started a bit before that.
You mentioned you had this telecommunications company, Carrier Connect. Was it a gradual shift in your attention? Were you able to kind of pay attention to both? How did you manage? You already got a company that you founded, and now you have this big idea, and you start to have people who you can do it with. But how do you manage all that?
Yeah, the big difference between the two businesses was Carrier Connect was like an arbitrage business. So I bootstrapped it, didn't take in any funding, programmed the first version myself, and then I brought in like a kind of a outsourced team to do V2 and V3. And it just made money, right? It wasn't a huge vision. It was a nice arbitrage business. Whereas Tixr, I knew was going to be a much larger build, and I would need to bring in a real team of like core architects. I'd outsourced everything for the telecom company, but I really wanted to build like a really world-class product with Tixr. So we wanted to keep everything, with American engineers and really controlled from a quality perspective. Quality perspective over here. So I went out and tried to raise capital, right? And I was unable to do so. It was very challenging to raise capital. A lot of it because of the space that we were in. It just wasn't, primary ticketing companies aren't something that was getting a lot of financing for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
So I decided to do what I did with my first business, just bootstrap it, right? So Patrick and our engineers, they worked for equity and for kind of low salaries at the very beginning. And these are very high level people. And what I'm getting to is I had to run Carrier Connect in parallel. I had no choice, right? So Carrier Connect is, as I was building Tixr, I was also running that, and it was effectively funding Tixr, right? So it was like seed funding it. And then as Tixr started to grow, then we eventually raised financing, and we hit profitability and started generating revenues and stuff like that. I basically weaned that company down to zero effectively, and then I've been Tixr ever since.
We're recording this 2 days after a pretty big announcement, but before I get to that, really a massive client for you, can you give us the elevator pitch when you walk in and tell somebody who Tixr is and why they should consider you? What does that pitch sound like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been consistent since we started, right? We started the business because we felt that there frankly needed to be something new, or at least, at a minimum, new options within the space. The largest, sports teams, musicians, name it, the big brands in live entertainment that really touch people's hearts and they really feel a great affinity to. They've been operated by legacy technology that helps them get into those experiences for many years, right? I mean, 30, 40 years. Some of these companies have been around. So the first thing we always tell people is it's time for change, and here's a new option, right? It's there are old cars and there's a new car now, right? And a new car brand. So that's the beginning of it. And then our entire perspective is different, right? We're much more of a white label system, right? So it's less about us, it's much more about them, and that really permeates everything we do. We're not a large publicly traded company. We're not a company that is has a big board and complex decision making. We are at scale. We're one of the bigger players in the space today, but we operate very boutique and very hands on. And that personalization and that knowing you can reach out to a variety of team members, myself included, and how accessible we are in solving your problems and needs, that really speaks well to people. And then once you actually show them the product, it's about design thinking and really heavy emphasis on the fan experience and beautiful design, both on the front end and the back end. It's about innovation, things that they haven't seen or done before, perhaps, right? That open up doors to new revenue opportunities while creating a great fan experience. And then it's about just redefining the concept of risk, right? One of the things that has been a challenge in this business is people are generally risk averse, and there's a concept of like, there's this, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and no one's going to get fired if I go with kind of the larger players. And what we're really telling people is the world is changing really quickly, right? Especially in the technology world. And ticketing is one of your primary revenue drivers, and not just that, but it's that first touch point in the fan commercial experience with your brand, oftentimes. And the bigger risk we think is not moving forward with modernized technology. So so there's it's a combination of broad strokes, conceptual things that we fundamentally believe are true, not just for us, but for any company, right? Like we're changing tools constantly here to stay up with the times now, especially with the the emergence of AI technologies. But then there's also the product, right? And we really show the product. We try not to talk about it. We really show it. And I think when you see
Hmm.
the product and how different it is, I think it really speaks to people.
When you talk about the technological advances, for those of us who aren't behind the scenes or in the weeds and are just used to wanting to go on and be able to buy tickets without a lot of friction, and understand what it's going to cost and what we're paying, and then have those tickets and be able to go to the event seamlessly. What are the more practical, tangible? How would somebody like me experience Tixr in a way that, oh, that this the technology is better. This is better for me. Um, or is it more that it's better for the team, the property, the venue? The technology helps them more than me.
It's really it's really both, right? So, we're a primary ticketing system, meaning our clients are the event producers or creators, right? The sports team, the music festival or whatever that is. So they're the ones that we're really speaking to. However, I mean, we built this as fans, right? So we're completely obsessed with the fan experience. It is paramount to what we do, and we also genuinely believe that if you take good care of the fans, you're taking good care of your clients, right? So we really speak to both. The way you experience the technology, though, is interesting. So just basic level stuff from a design and interactions perspective, it's obviously more modern and we'd like to think better thought through, right? So it's less friction, less clicks. It's a very fast system. It's stable. We don't, we can handle a tremendous amount of simultaneous transactions. So you're not going to have long waiting rooms and stuff like that. But that's a really good example. Is instead of sitting in a queue for a ticket, you can just go and buy. And that's better for the producer of the event because you're going to get a higher conversion rate, right? You're going to have people that are able to transact at a rapid clip. So you just straight up make more money and have less drop off. But for the fan, it's a much more pleasurable experience, right? So that's a good example of when things are well architected and when well thought out. For the producer of the event, you're yielding because you have an optimal conversion funnel, but also for the fan, you just have a better experience. I'm getting your tickets, and that's baseline. That was like the
Hmm.
first thing we really focused on and solved. But then, where also gets interesting is, you know, we sell more than tickets, right? So you can do merch packages, hotels, suites, like virtually anything at this point. You can buy on Tixr. We're actually transcending ticketing and moving into a larger e-commerce kind of a company tied to live entertainment. And again, if you take the fan perspective, well, I get to buy my T-shirt and pick it up, right? If I'm traveling in as a visitor of a sports team, I can now have a secure economic hotel option where everything's taken care of for me. So I have optionality that I didn't necessarily have before in a very elegant way. And if you're the team, it's great for you because you're increasing your revenues, right? You're increasing your throughput in terms of what you can sell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of examples of this, but it's always a two-sided equation when we're building products and innovating.
The big announcement that I alluded to a moment ago, um, the San Jose Earthquakes announced that they're partnering with you. I believe that's your first MLS club. Can you give us a little insight into how that deal came about, and also where it kind of fits for you and your growth strategy, and how you take a case study like that and build off of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big moment for us, right? We're over a decade into the company. Ticketing is something that, you know, we've learned you have to build brick by brick to build it right. It just takes a long time. It's a very complex, sophisticated, nuanced technology. So, we started in the general admission space, which is great, and we have some great clients, nightclubs and festivals and stuff like that. And around COVID, when 2020 hit, we really put our heads down and started the transition into reserve seating and building at scale reserve seating. But we had always architected the system for this, right? Patrick and I, when we first started the company, the vision was, again, grand. It was to really build a modern system that could displace or at least give a modern option to legacy systems that are operating in arenas and sports teams and stuff like that. That's where, that's the level where you're truly, a player in the space, but more importantly, where you're truly making an impact on the industry and on fans, right? Those big major moments are what really define people's lives, whether they're, it's a Super Bowl or, or an MLS match, against Inter Miami, which, the Earthquakes had just a couple a couple weeks ago, which was just like a big event. But those are the things that people really remember. So we always wanted to get to that point, right? So we spent, many years in parallel while we're, developing our general admission ticketing system on top of that, because the infrastructure was so solid now at this point to run ticketing, building the reserve seating infrastructure. And, we also started working with teams directly, getting to know them, talking to them about their needs. And that's been an iterative multi-year process, right? MLS, I think because of the nature of the MLS, it's a younger league. They're disruptive, really fresh perspectives in that league, much more open to change. We just found a home there, right? It's somewhere that they were really listening, and they really wanted change, by the way. From the legacies, there's quite a bit of frustration there. And so we really focused on the MLS, and we started working with a variety of teams. And the Earthquakes are interesting because they actually weren't a team that we'd been working on for a long time or working with for a long time, right? We met them, our head of sports, Nate Liberman, knew one of the people there. I heard through the grapevine that they were working on it. They were in the middle of an RFP. We reached out to them. They were actually close to decision, I think. And when they saw Tixr, I think it changed their perspective completely, right? And they really wanted change, right? They're just a phenomenal group of people, really world-class organization. We're super impressed by them. But from the first conversation, what we showed them, I think that really spoke to them was the fact that, we're not a new fly-by-night company. We're
Yeah.
transacting, very high volumes. We're one of the largest, players in ticketing now. We have publicly traded companies, not just domestically but internationally, that have been using us for years. So you're safe, right? You're going to be good. This is a stable product, but also we're pushing the envelope, and we want to push the envelope with you guys, right? And that's really what they wanted. So it ended up being just a great fit and great timing.
I'm really interested in your patience, if that's the right word, and you can tell me if it's not. But I feel like so many startups, so many businesses now, right? It is a crazy sprint to try to build what the end outcome would be. So you could have started this and tried to raise a ton of money and get the reserved seating built at the start, right off the bat, right? And it sounds like instead it's been very intentional, methodical, even in getting it built with that infrastructure you referred to, so that it was incredibly solid before you go to the reserve ticketing and before you go after and win a client like the Earthquakes a decade plus in. You just don't hear that many stories these days where that patience is part of it. Um, did you make a decision early on that that was kind of the plan and you were going to have that patience, or was it just the byproduct of other factors as you started this?
That's a really good question. It's a combination of both, right? As an entrepreneur, I'm a bit more old school, right? If you look at the trends, I bootstrapped my other companies. I didn't take investment money. And part of, but it's a kind of a two-sided. It's kind of two sides to that. One side is, again, like, it was challenging raising capital, very challenging, right? Primary ticketing is a tough industry to raise in. There's a perception out there that there are monopolistic players, and that the market is heavily limited. And venture capital is a winner takes all mindset, right? And it's also an older industry, right? So when you have, we've gone through multiple cycles. It was VR, then it was, crypto, and now it's AI, where all the money kind of flows. The pitch of, hey, here's a big business and we want to build something newer and better. That's not as like sexy or exciting, right? So if you look, a lot of venture capital money has gone into secondary market companies because they can go to market quickly and win the consumer, and primary has been pretty neglected. But the other thing we saw was our competitors, right? The companies that were in the space that were newer companies that tried to take a kind of like aggressive approach, they crashed and burned, right? Because it's just not one of those things that you can build overnight. It is a long, steady burn building a ticketing company, because there's just a ton of features to build. It's very nuanced. You have to really learn. You have to really listen and fix things, and you have to iterate, and that takes time. And it takes time and it takes patience. So part of it is again, my old school bootstrap mindset, but then the other part were just like the realities of the industry, right? I am somebody that and Patrick, my co-founder as well, we do take the long view, right? We're long view guys. I've had basically two companies my whole life, right? I'm not jumping from place to place. It's a very stable long burn. I remember listening to interviews with Jeff Bezos where he talked about the long view and how important it is to take the long view, and that really stuck with me. And if you look at great founders, they're obsessive about their product. And this is a product company, and you have obsessive people that are product focused people first and foremost. Well, why we do what we do. We happen to be in ticketing, but we're really product engineers and designers. So, we're just focused on getting it right, and that does take time. And and for those reasons, we've been patient.
Was there ever a moment where you almost pulled the plug?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if like any passionate relationship, if you're not ready to pull the plug, you're not going fast enough or hard enough, right? Yeah, I mean, it does get frustrating. This is a business where you can lose having a superior product, right? You don't see that often, and it is very frustrating as someone who's heavily focused on technology and really understands the challenges and dynamics and the value of what you're building. So that's probably the most frustrating part of all of it. But yeah, anytime you have bad moments, but you come out stronger, and we have a great team that's been with us since day one, for over a decade, which is also very rare. Our founding team no one's ever left, and that keeps me going, right? And also, I love the industry. We're having fun. We made great friends, have incredible experiences, and that's what really defines your life, and it's been a real pleasure to be doing it.
You mentioned at one point, the challenge of, well, you don't get fired hiring the legacy players. Ticketmaster, right? Is, I don't know if they're the Voldemort in this world. You don't get fired usually going with the legacy player, the dominant market share company. I was in a meeting once, and I'll be a little cryptic here, but it was a meeting. It was a team we were working with on other things, but I sat in on a meeting where one of the biggest tech players um, was talking to them about expanding their relationship. And one of the things they were talking about was trying to maybe build a ticketing platform to supplant Ticketmaster. And even with this massive company, very well funded, armies of engineers, the team, the switching costs or the fears that, well, ticketing is such, it's the lifeblood so often of our revenues. Like, do we really want to switch? That's a hard barrier to break through. And so I'd love to know, like, with the earthquake, how did you break through that fear of switching or not going with the main old school legacy player? How do you think you won there?
Well, I think it was twofold. Number one, their team is Their mindset is innovation and forward thinking. So it starts with them, right? And they have the right mindset, right? They understand the value of technology and they understand how rapidly it's changing, especially today, right? 10, 15 years less the case, but I mean, anybody that's following the trends, I mean, we're going through a period of disruption that's unlike anything we've ever experienced. I mean, they're a younger team, so they grew up with technology like we did. We find that younger executives and operators in their 30s and 40s, bad technology or like an antiquated user experience is a deal breaker for them. It's just they see it as something that's not that shouldn't be the case, right? Whereas teams that have been around for longer or have more senior leadership is they're just more conservative, right? So it really starts with the team and the dynamic of the people making the decision. And then what we again what we emphasized is, look, here's our track record, right? And here are all the companies we work with. And we've been doing this for a long time. And even though, we haven't, we didn't have a tier one pro sports team, we have a large number of sports clients, right? Major, and some that are actually much more complicated than operating like an MLS team. Like the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach has been a client of ours for years. I mean, just their grandstands alone are larger than an MLS stadium, but then they also have general admission. It's a multi-day event. It's really complicated. They have different price points for every single seat. Like it's really like a challenge to do. And we built a lot of technology to support something of that scale. So we're like, look, we're not gonna fail you, right? We're not failing. We've been around for a long time. You're talking directly to us. I'm personally going to be on it, as is Patrick and the larger engineering team. And I think that really appeased their fears, right? And we showed them, they did their diligence. We dug in. We also had the benefit of working with other MLS teams in like an R&D capacity for a good 18, 24 months at that point. And they spoke really highly of us, right? And they really spoke to how we listen, how quickly we're able to develop and how we hit all of our timelines, which is quite rare. It's a difficult thing to achieve. But we have a track record of really like building at a rapid clip. And we were quite honest, right? Look, if there are product gaps, we're going to have time and we are going to deliver on those product gaps, right? So I think it was their mindset tied with our, the fact that we are proven, and the fact that, we also had a proven track record of maneuvering challenges and being flexible when necessary. And they just decided to make the leap.
There will be both the primary and the secondary, right? And they get to control the secondary. I know we've done research in the past in this space that tells us that younger fans don't even really differentiate between the two anymore. It's kind of meaningless to them. It's just what are the tickets that I can buy and how much do they cost, and whether it's the original face value or not doesn't really matter all that much to them. When you look at the secondary market, you mentioned there are a higher volume of players in that space. How much is being able to have both primary and secondary and white label and let the teams control? How much is that a key to your value proposition with all those other secondary players out there?
I mean, it's critical, right? I mean, we learned very early on in approaching teams several years ago, like you have to have a resale product. You just have to. It's built into it's built into the business model of professional sports today in the United States. It's a little bit different internationally, but here it's absolutely a must and it's absolutely critical, for a variety of reasons that we can get into. But it's been a real education learning about it. So in terms of like having a secondary market, you had to, and then look, there's the option of integrating with existing secondary players, and we took a hard look at that. And there was a moment where I didn't want to overburden our team because it's such a daunting thing to now build basically a company on top of a company. But I had a talk with my partner Patrick, and he was like, "We're just going to build it. I got this." And it's that kind of like camaraderie and partnership that we've had for a decade plus, and the trust I have in the quality of our engineers and our product that I was like, let's do it, right? and we've done that traditionally. Part of what's made us successful is we're able to build things elegantly in one system versus having to plug things in, right? So you get a lot of efficiency out of that, a better fan experience, a better client experience, and the resale is a really good example of that. But but I'll tell you this, much like, I think when we first started the interview, I was talking about the mindset shift, right, around being more of a white label versus, kind of a brand and all that kind of stuff. But we have a mindset shift around resale also at this company, right? We don't think of resale as a binary thing, right? So if you look at legacy companies, or even just the way 99% of ticketing transactions are done, you buy it and then you resell it, right? It's kind of like those are your two options. It's either available and it's not. And if it's not available, your only hope to get it is on the secondary, and then that's across all these multiple systems, and it's just not a very great experience for the fan, right? Because you're like shopping across multiple outlets and you have all these tacked on fees and all that kind of stuff. And what we found is fans just really want flexibility, right? Post transaction flexibility. So once you've bought something, you just want the optionality to do something with it. And they want access to tickets in the first place. And they want to be able to interact with the operator. So resale is just one product we've built. We have a variety of products that are all tied to fan flexibility, right? So for example, if you have a seat up in the rafters and you want to go courtside, we have built-in in-app upgrades. You could just move, right? We're rolling out a refund product where you could refund your ticket if the organizer around allows you to, or refund to a credit that you could use at your time, right? Um, you know, within the resale product, there's innovations like a private resale market and stuff like that, right? So, we have a wait list product, which if you're sold out, you can pre-authorize your card and say, if a ticket becomes available, run my credit card, right? So we've built a whole suite of integrated flexibility products. And again, kind of tying back to what we were talking about earlier, these are really, really great because they're transformational for the fan, where now, they have less risk in buying a ticket, and they have a lot of, kind of right built-in options after the fact on ways to move around and stuff like that. And for the operators, it's great because it's less customer service for them to have to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to have the issue of having fake tickets and stuff like that. And you're creating general additional revenue, right? By allowing people to move and transact more within your ecosystem. So we're really redefining the way we think about resale as a whole.
Last question before some rapid fires to close us out. You're in the process of launching Tixr Brands. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's half of what we do, like I said earlier, is the product. The other half is the consulting piece of it, right? We found that if our goal, right, is to improve the fan experience and to, be a great partner for these brands that create incredible moments that are important to people's lives, we need to support them in any way that we possibly can, right? So, over the years, we started out as, just tech guys that weren't from live entertainment, but we've really gotten to know these organizations really well and seen their needs. And we've built effectively internal agencies to solve those needs. Like we have a digital marketing practice internally, right? We have a partnerships practice where we network people and kind of consult and stuff like that. But the Tixr Brands concept is, we started working with brands that wanted to sponsor events, and we started making connections around that. And sponsorships are a large revenue driver for teams and any live entertainment brand. And the teams, very obviously, it's a large practice internally. And as a matter of fact, ticketing is one of the largest sponsorship categories for professional sports teams, right? So we've been doing sponsorships ourselves for all of our clients, but now in a very big way for professional sports teams. And we really want to align ourselves and be a strong partner on that front. But on top of that, we're working on bringing external sponsors in, and that's really what the Tixr Brands practice is. And one of the advantages that we have is we're such a big data company. We're very good with data. We capture a lot of data on fans. That data is owned by the team. And we believe data is like the gold of the future. I mean, AI is built on data, so you really need to have control and not allow, and this is part of the legacy ticketing mindset is it's their data and they're reselling it. We don't do any of that. So we use the data to optimally target sponsors that could then funnel money into the event companies that we work with, right? It's early days, but we're already having a tremendous amount of success, and we think it's going to be a great value add for a larger book of business.
Well, you're preaching to the choir on the importance of data. I feel like I should add you to some of our calls that we have when we're trying to win business. But yeah, really, really incredible, I think, to see and very much admire kind of what you've built and the approach you've taken to build it. Very cool. I want to ask you a few of those rapid fires just to learn a little bit more about you before we leave. You mentioned being an AI major, so maybe that was a spoiler for this one. But you went to UCLA, and I was curious, kind of for this interesting niche of the world that you now find yourself in. What was the most useful class that you took back in college?
Hey man, it's funny, AI was part of the curriculum, but we were learning like Lisp, which is it's like an old technology nobody uses anymore, but was like a early machine learning AI technology. So there wasn't much relevance to what we do today. I'd probably say I actually think this is going to be different than what you would think. I think the most important class I took at UCLA was speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a speech class where I was back then, when I'd present, I was writing stuff down and memorizing it and trying to regurgitate. And they taught us extemporaneous speaking, which is the concept of, you have a general outline of what you want to say and then you speak naturally. And it's an absolute game changer. It takes a lot of time to practice, but but I use it every day. I'm using it for this interview right now. Like I actually don't, I'm very comfortable, giving like the broad strokes and just speaking very naturally. So it really was easily the most valuable class I think I took at UCLA.
I think that's great advice for anybody who would be listening to this that still has a chance to take more courses. What is do you have a quote you live by, or a mantra, or a favorite quote? Anything that would give us a little insight into you?
Yeah, yeah. I think very thematically, I use this one quite a bit. I think this Plato quote, it's been assigned to Einstein a bunch of times, but it's necessity is the mother of invention, right? And if you look at our story and everything we've been talking about today, we felt it was necessary to do this and we did it, right? It's as simple as that. And I tell entrepreneurs that all the time. They're like, well, what do I do? What do I build? I'm like, well, you got to find a problem and solve it. And things get solved when it's absolutely necessary. And that's a big part of the Tixr story.
Obviously, the Quakes is a big recent one, but when you look all the way back, what was the first yes that kind of validated Tixr?
The first, yes. So if you remember back to the early story, I wasn't able to raise capital, and I knew I was going to need capital just because you need a lot of engineers and you got to pay them, and it's a big build, and it's going to be a long term build. So the first yes was the very first investor that believed in us and invested in us, and he's a fantastic guy. His name is his name is Bud Colligan. He was one of the partners at Excel. He was, early on the Mac project with Steve Jobs, just like a Silicon Valley luminary, and just a wonderful guy. And not only did it validate that, he believed in me and in the project and liked what we were doing, but he became an advisor to me, right? And really, really beat me up and toughened me and was like, look, you're in for a ride. This isn't your bootstrap telecom company. This is big leagues now. So both in terms of validation, but also in terms of just having a great mentor for all these years. He's been really fantastic.
If you had an extra hour every day, what would you do? How would you use it?
I'd play with my daughters.
How many daughters?
I have three little girls. They're babies.
How old?
One's about to turn 5, one's about to turn 3, and the other one just turned 1. So we've been,
Oh my God.
yeah, I know that's intense. We've been cranking them out every couple of years, but
You are, as they say, my kids are now 9 and 8, but when they were younger, and I only have two, everybody used to say when they were in that age range, oh, you're in it. You're
yeah,
in it.
yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
fun.
that's
I'm
impressive.
I'm enjoying it.
Hardest decision you've ever had to make as a founder?
Hardest decision I've had to make. For Tixr, it was probably moving away from my family. I'm from the Bay Area, right? My parents are up there, my brother was up there, all my closest friends were up there. And I decided to move to Los Angeles to start Tixr, both because my co-founder was down here and his engineering team was down here, but also we wanted to be closer to entertainment, right? To like the larger entertainment sphere. And look, I mean, I love the Bay Area. I went to UCLA, so it wasn't like I wasn't in LA, right? But moving away from your parents, I didn't see my parents for, very much for many years because we're so heads down on the business. That was a big sacrifice and a very challenging decision to make. But they've now moved down here, so we're all back together, which is great.
Oh, beautiful. I was going to say, well, it seems like that sacrifice is paying off, but even better now to have them nearby. That's great. Well, Robert, I really appreciate you joining us. I mean, this ticketing space, obviously, it's the lifeblood. It's at the heart of our industry, and so kind of watching it evolve at a macro level. There's always that moment, right, where the Taylor Swift tickets go on sale and everybody freaks out and everybody wonders how this space is still the way it is. And then you find pockets of people who say, well, it's changing, it's evolving. And so being able to learn more from you, pick your brain a little bit today on how Tixr is part of that evolution is really interesting, and I really appreciate the time.
Oh, good. Thanks for having me. The solutions are out there. We're building them, and there's other great companies that are making change, and humanity and the world progresses as technology changes for the positive. So we're trying to be part of that. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for the time. Really enjoyed the conversation.
To our listeners, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. My email is jeff@nvgt.com. You can also connect with me on my personal LinkedIn or connect with us on the Navigate page. Again, this is Jeff Nelson with Navigate, joined by Robert Davari from Tixr. Thanks for joining us on Navigating Sports Business.
Great. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.